Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to special episode 219.5 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com. Today, special episode, just Coach Boyle and myself. We're going to be talking all about the complete core. Coach Boyle just put out a product. It's actually coming out Monday the 13th, and it's all about the core. This is some of the best information from Dr. Stuart McGill, Shirley Sarman, PRI, and more. And Coach Boyle just basically shows you how to put it, how he uses it in the trenches every day. I seriously think this is Coach Boyle's most important product, because if you have anybody that, if you train anybody that is like a back pain sufferer, or you just want a great program to help avoid some of the common problems with people who possibly could have back pain, this is it right here. What he goes over in this product, and we're going to go over more with him, but when to train the core, how to train the core, how much, the role of the core, how breathing is involved. Really got into more about breathing in this one too, what to avoid, and probably most important, some of the developmental progressions and regressions. And he's going to go over, he has a couple lectures in here and then goes over all of the exercises, and they just did another great job with this product. So you can go to continuefit.com. You can get the discounted link. They're doing $50 off until Friday the 17th. So go to continuefit.com and click on that link to get the product. So let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. Coach, thanks for doing this.
And thank you for doing it. Come on, let's be honest here. You're helping me more than I'm helping you.
Well, I'm trying to make some money too here, all right? So just remind everybody, don't buy it from him, buy it from me. Coach, we're talking about complete core conditioning. I love what you said in this, because obviously I think you're an expert and we all look up to you and you're our mentor and you're the expert here, but you're saying, no, I'm an interpreter. I'm not really the expert here. Give us an idea of like why you feel this way.
Well, I mean, I think the reality is, and I guess that goes back to, again, the genesis of the product like we talked about with conditioning. I don't think I'm the expert in conditioning either. I don't think I'm the expert in core training. What I really do, as I said, I think I'm the interpreter. I think I'm the guy who goes and reads the Porterfield and DeRosa book and the McGill book and the Sarman book, and then tries to take all that stuff together, and maybe, Philip Beach from Anna Hartman, and said, okay, how can we make this usable? How can we kind of distill this down so that a strength coach, personal trainer, somebody more like me who's not really the expert can use it, can make it useful? Because I think we do look at it and think, wow, there's so much stuff out there and people are throwing so much stuff at us, and you realize you could get sort of trapped playing with blood pressure cuffs and, trying to do draw-ins or hollows or braces. And it's like, okay, can we make this simpler? Can we make it a little bit easier to understand? And I always feel like that's what I do well. And I guess I'm an expert in cheating and stealing. That's what I'm really an expert in. And that's what I'm really good at, is that ability to listen to the right people and then sort of interpret what they're saying and then say, hey, I can make this digestible to the strength coach, to the personal trainer who really does just want to make the program better.
Absolutely. And I would say you're not a thief, you're more of a borrower, because you always give credit. So I think there's a distinction there.
And maybe Robin Hood, Robin gives the poor. I don't know exactly how if you steal somebody's stuff and then you use it, does that make you less of a thief?
I don't know. I think,
it'd be like if I stole your bike and I rode it, does that make it better?
Well, you know what, though? I think with this this is a different story, because you're going to sell a lot of McGill books. You're going to sell a lot of Sarman books. You're going to, when you've sold a lot of, I remember Gray Cook, this was 10 years ago, but I remember hearing him say, we were at Exos, and I was there for a workshop, and he was like, telling somebody, he's like, Mike Boyle sold more functional movement screens than I have, than we have at FMS. So it's, you're taking from them, but you're also helping them as well. So
no, it is true. Shirley Sarman, when I met her, knew exactly who I was. I don't know if I ever told you this story, but she said to me, I went up to her to take a picture with her because I said, I'm getting a picture with Shirley Sarman. And she said, I know who you are. She said, a lot of people come to my courses because of you, and I have no idea why. and I said, I was like, Dr. Sarman, you've revolutionized sports performance training as far as I'm concerned. And she looks at me and she's like, really? And I said, really? I said, you changed the way that I thought about so many things with things that you said. And she was, I would say, somewhere between surprised and shocked that somebody like me in really a very different industry from her would think that highly of her contribution. But I do the same thing with Stuart. I mean, Stuart, he changed everything that we do from a course standpoint. There's nothing that we still do probably relative to what we were doing before, because Stuart was one of the first guys to come along and be like, sort of, it's really about the stability, and that means we're going to do stability exercises. And I think before we were talking about stability and doing mobility exercises, and you're kind of like, wow. And it's almost the embarrassing part sometimes is I always say I feel really smart for finding the smart people and stealing from them. And then I feel really dumb sometimes when they say really simple things that I feel like I should have figured out myself beforehand. But yeah, I guess that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's get into complete core conditioning a little bit. Again, obviously I'm biased, but I think you did a great job. I think you guys do a great job organizing things. Like you talked about what is the core and the anatomy, which was, sometimes you don't always get into that but this time you felt it was important. But I want you to tell this story. I love the anatomy story of you lecturing back in the day and somebody asking you a question. Give us that story.
Oh, I still remember. It was Perform Better in New Jersey. And there was some guy there who still have no idea who the guy was, but he was obviously, whether he was a PT or a trainer or whatever he was, but he was extremely well read. And I remember him raising his hand and saying, "What are you doing for transverse abdominis?" And I remember being up in front of the room thinking to myself, I don't really know what that is, so I don't. And I kind of, abba-dabbed my way around it, like, made up some bullshit answer, and thought, I am never going to be in that situation again. I am never going to have some guy make a monkey out of me by asking me a question in a talk, because I was doing a core training talk. And he threw something at me, and all of a sudden I'm sitting there thinking, I don't really know core anatomy the way that I should, in terms of we were simplifying it and we were talking for us then. It was sort of flexion and lateral flexion, rotation. It was literally like if I showed you that talk now, you'd be like, it's the anti-talk. You're saying the polar opposite. And that's the stuff that I always laugh about with everybody in terms of how critical they are of progress, of learning. And as I said, I just had that situation where I realized that, hey, this isn't going to happen again. And I remember I went back, I think it was Brandon Marcello actually that sent me a whole file of articles on transverse abdominis. And it was a lot of the Paul Chek stuff and the Hodges stuff. And I think that for me was the first big kind of watershed moment, the first big eye opener where I looked and said, wow, there's a lot I don't know.
Yeah, that's cool. Love that you went out and you researched more. And, maybe you can help me because this deliberately constrained transfer system, what is, you brought this up in the DVD.
I think that's going to be something that people keep bringing up. The whole idea is that, and we talk about the lumbar spine is built for stability. It is deliberately constrained. I was talking to a group of PT students yesterday, and I said, the lumbar spine is not supposed to move. That's why it's got really big vertebrae. It was designed. It was deliberately constrained. All the vertebrae are not all the same size, and they don't have all the same movement characteristics. And the idea is that they deliberately gave each segment only a certain amount of, say, rotational capability or lateral flexion capability or whatever it is, with the idea knowing that it's the movement of the unit that's going to create the motion and not the movement at any one individual segment. So I guess that's what I mean. It's deliberately constrained. Structurally, it was built with this idea in mind. And so, and I say that I use that term because I want people to understand sort of the lumbar mobility people, the people who still argue with me about lumbar mobility. It's like, and the Sarman quote is in there where she sort of shows like 90-90s and scorpions and leg overs, and she said they're I forget what's the word she used. Oh my God, particularly dangerous.
Okay.
And I say to everybody, she didn't say dangerous. Dangerous wasn't enough. She said particularly dangerous. And so you start thinking about, she's not just saying this is a bad idea. It's like saying it's a really, really bad idea. So start looking at that. And that's, I guess, my whole thing, like with the interpreter part, is that, wait a second, arguably one of the 5, 10 most influential physical therapists of the last, half century, right? 75 years old saying, that's really dangerous. Don't do that. And then you get these guys arguing, oh, well, I do it. It makes my back feel better. It doesn't matter. Maybe it did make your back feel better. That's okay. You've got somebody with like 50 years of experience in the field saying it's dangerous. My experience has shown me that it's dangerous. My knowledge of anatomy shows me that it's dangerous. So, and that's, I guess, the idea. Deliberately constrained system. There's no value to trying to increase lumbar mobility. If we're at that 13 degrees, if you've got 13 degrees of rotation and you've got it in both directions, you're good. Start working on your T-spine. Get some of that mobility back. Or work on your hips and get that mobility back. Something that's going to, that I think is going to trip up a lot of people where they're going to be like, what is he talking about? Deliberately constrained system.
Yeah. And I think you answer it well in the lecture as well. So, and when you take everything together, when you watch it, you do answer it. So, but I do want you to define, core stability and motor control, because there's so many terms out there. You throw core strength in there, and some people are confused, especially younger trainers. But define this idea of core stability and throw in motor control, this idea.
Well, and I really think core stability, is the ability to move your extremities without your core moving unnecessarily. And I think that's one of the things that some people will get caught up with. Well, it's going to move. I'm like, I know it's going to move. The idea is that there's no compensatory movement. I'm not extending my back to move my shoulder. I'm not extending my back to move my hip. I'm not flexing my spine to flex my hip. Those types of things. So that to me, and I think you get into this idea that core stability probably really is motor control. When you look at that, I think motor control can apply to shoulders. Motor control can apply to different areas. But again, motor control is, again, that ability to, I keep thinking of the Sarman quote, the right muscle moving the right joint at the right time. That's really motor control. When you think about, hey, what's motor control? Well, motor control is the right muscle moving the right joint at the right time. That's really what we want. And what's a good motor system? Well, a good motor system is when the right muscle moves the right joint at the right time. And what's core stability? Well, core stability means that your core is not moving in response to one of these accessory movements or to create it in some senses. And we think a lot of times with hip extension or hip flexion, they can just be mimicked with spinal extension or spinal flexion. You can watch people all the time doing exactly that, where you think they didn't move their hip. They moved their spine. And by moving their spine, they made their hip move. I want to be the opposite. Can I keep my spine still, at least in the relative sense, and then be able to move my hip into flexion or extension?
Absolutely. And Coach, this could be your most important product ever. And the reason why I say it is because it's so segmented, and it's so important because I think it bridges the gap between, like you said, you're an interpreter, and you had a couple quotes in here. More than 650 650,000 surgical procedures are performed annually for back pain in the U.S., with costs exceeding $20 billion. Americans spend $50 billion a year on back pain. And, we should be the first line of defense. I mean, with smart programming, with what you're talking about here, it's super important because, again, we had McGill on last show. He's going to be on the next show talking about the gift of injury and his journey with Brian Carroll and getting him back. He wrote the book Back Mechanic for the general population. But this really shows trainers and strength coaches the full progression of what they can do. That's why I feel like this is probably your most important product. Can you just expand on this idea of the back pain? Because you're a back pain sufferer from back in the day yourself.
Yeah, I think that the reality is, and I've said this in seminars over and over again, if you can learn to handle clients with back pain, you will never be at a loss for clients. Because when someone says, hey, my back bothered me and then I went and started training with Anthony, now my back doesn't hurt anymore, that puts you in as part of this 50 billion, with a B, dollar market. Because there's so many people suffering. And there was a Facebook post the other day that I saw where one of my Facebook friends, whoever it was lamenting. He said, have a client with 3 bulging discs and her doctor recommended yoga. And he was like, hands up, what am I going to do? And I said, thank God there's all these doctors and bad trainers, because if everybody was good, we wouldn't have as much business. It's like, which was, obviously a sarcastic sort of tongue-in-cheek kind of answer. But it's unbelievable how not enough people are paying attention and how not enough people are listening, whether it's Stuart McGill's information or, as I said, Porterfield DeRosa, Sarman, the things that I've found to be somewhat foundational for me. And then you see other trainers who are still saying, well, you should be able to do some crunches if you want to. And you're like, yeah, except for the fact that McGill shows that that's how you blow up your discs. Like, why would you do it? I get that you can, there's a lot of things. We all engage in different levels of risky behavior, but I try to not do that with my clients, particularly when I can think of better stuff to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what the whole second half of the program is. The whole second half of the program is better stuff to do. Yeah. Hey, here's some stuff if you want to work your abs. You're in this, again, like you said, anatomy. We defined core, and you realize core is one of those things that you could look at and say, well, it's everything from your kneecaps to your shoulders. And you could make a case for that. Because when you're looking at sort of what's involved in all of these things, and you could look at, maybe it's everything from, thoracolumbar junction down to the lowest insertion point of an adductor, medial knee. But in any case, there's just so much stuff. And this was interesting because Pat said, can you send me some core workouts? So I said, no, because we don't have any core workouts. I'll send you our programs and you'll see where the core stuff is fit into the program. So that's what I did, is I just sent him the 4-day program, and people will see where does chop fit in? Where does lift fit in? Where does anti-extension fit in? Where does anti-lateral flexion fit in? Because for us, it all fits into different places within the program. It's not like we say, we're going to do 15 minutes of core before we start. We're doing core throughout the whole program. And then, as you said, if you got to the end, you start looking at, is all unilateral training core training? When we start getting into whether it's TRX row or one-arm dumbbell bench or one-leg squat, are those the highest expressions of core stability? And I think that's maybe the last thought process that I kind of leave somebody with, is that ultimately at the end of this, if you've got someone who can be really stable in unilateral exercise, you've probably got someone who's got good core stability.
Yeah, and I think, not to jump ahead, but, with your developmental progression here, there is a lot. Like, it's funny, I downloaded that, your program, and it did say, like, whatever's bolded and highlighted is part of the core program, which is, all over. It's in your tri and quad sets. It's in your activation period. It's in the beginning when you're breathing. It's at the end. So yeah, it's an interesting, and we're certainly going to get a lot of questions about that on strengthcoach.com. But I do want to kind of jump a little bit back right now. I was really surprised at how much, and this is for somebody who talks to you every 2 weeks on the Strength Coach podcast, how much really you're spending on the breathing. Can you go over some of the breathing, this idea about breathing?
Well, the reality is we're not spending as much time on breathing as we are trying to better incorporate breathing into things we were already doing. Mm-hmm. So when you really look at it, we might have added a minute of breathing at the beginning for someone who really needs it. But then we're trying to incorporate that into bridging. We're trying to incorporate that into quadruped. We're trying to incorporate that into a lot of the things that we're doing where we're getting people better at breathing. Because and I've said this a bunch of times in seminars and I think on the forum, breathing is the cool thing right now. and probably rightfully so. As I said, I just got done talking to 100 physical therapy students yesterday at Mass General, and that was one of the things that I said. Anything that you're doing for 20,000 reps a day is probably pretty important. And if you're doing 20,000 reps of something with the wrong muscles, the wrong way, that's going to be a little bit of a problem. And I was amazed because, and because you've been sort of with me through this whole process of strengthcoach.com and the forums, and there was so many of these posts, work on breathing, work on breathing, work on breathing. And I would just be sitting there going, how do you work on breathing with people who breathe? And that was one of the things I wanted people to get across, or I wanted to get across to people, was that I'm right there with you. I didn't understand it in the beginning, whether it was Brett Jones talking about it or somebody else talking about it. Have you checked breathing? Have you worked on breathing? And I kind of sat there and thought, it's not like a CPR class. I'm not going to put my hand over your mouth and see if you're breathing. I know you're there. I know you're breathing. Until I made the foolish step of just asking somebody to sort of, hey, repeat what I just said in the physical act. Inhale through your nose, exhale out your mouth, purse lips, blow out hard. And then saw how many people couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I was shocked. And all of a sudden it was like one of those huge light bulb moments for me where I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I get it. And it's so simple. Just tell them what to do and see if they can do it. And amazing the number of people who, when I said inhale through your nose, exhale out your mouth, gulped a huge mouthful of air and went, is that it? And it's like, no. That was not. I didn't say anything about taking the biggest mouth breath you could take. But that's what, so I guess, and so to me, a lot of time was spent talking about it and showing it because we're really trying to get people to understand. It's like I have elite athletes who can't conceptualize the idea of in the nose, out the mouth, of exhaling on the concentric. Okay, if you're going to squeeze your glutes, blow air out. And they literally would look at me and be like, so if I'm coming up, do I inhale?
Yeah.
And I'm, no, if you're coming up, that's the concentric. That's where you're squeezing the muscles. That's where I want you to exhale hard. And part of it is you almost have to not get mad at them because I sometimes want to be like, are you not listening?
Yeah. Well, look, in this program, you had Steve, your guy Steve doing it. Was it Chris or Steve? I forget which one. But yeah,
and
he was having a hard time.
Yep, he was doing it absolutely backwards. And as I said to you, I almost said cut and let's edit this out and do it over again. And then I thought, no, actually, this is a really good example of somebody who's at MBSC every day and who's obviously listened to us talk about this, but he's not, one of the big things, he's not young. He's in his 40s. And he was sort of a late convert, into the field. And again, he was the perfect example of someone, who's got it. He was doing it backwards, literally backwards.
Yeah.
In terms of he was inhaling as he was trying to generate a concentric contraction, and it took a little bit of teaching for us to get him. So I'm glad you noticed that, and I'm glad it came across in that way because I did contemplate thinking like, oh my God, I have somebody who's not doing the exercise right. We're trying to do demos, and then I thought, oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
This is a good opportunity for people to see that it's not as simple as we would like to make it out to be.
Yeah, and I've been kind of hip to that for a while because of my RKC SFG experiences and how important the breath has always been with them. And it's not just breathing on like we're saying on our back or doing crocodile breaths, but it's during like a kettlebell swing and you understand how important that short breath is for that brace.
I don't know if you're, it was interesting because I was joking about that with people. I can remember the first time we had Nagar and Joe Sansalone come up and do a kettlebell thing for us, and they were like,
yeah,
making all these noises, and I'm looking at them like, calm down, guys, like enough with the fake breathing thing. And because again, at that time, I was not well educated enough. I didn't realize, and that, okay, this is deliberate, and that really deliberate hard exhale, and that was one of the things I related it in the talk to, like the ki in judo and chi, and there's all these things that sort of people talk about, getting your center. There's been a lot of kind of mumbo jumbo stuff that went around this idea. Instead of someone saying, hey, guess what? End stale exhalation recruits your deep abdominal muscles. That's why you should be doing this. And to me, that's the kind of stuff that hits the nail right on the head. And you think, oh, now I get it. If I blow out hard, I stabilize. Yes, because end stage exhalation is performed by internal oblique, external oblique, transverse abdominis. Those deep abdominal muscles are involved, and that goes back to kind of the value of blowing up a balloon and the PRI stuff. And that's, I guess, to me, the best thing about this was that we could hopefully tie it all together.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think you did, and I that's what I was saying. Like when I said you spend a lot of time, and I meant in this product with just understanding during those exercises, not teaching people just how to breathe, but like you had said, incorporating breathing into all these exercises. And just go over, Coach, before we get to your program and finish up, but go over this idea. I don't think it's going to be new to a lot of people that have followed you, but there's a lot of new stuff in here in your developmental progression, in some of the progressions and kind of the way you're teaching them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just that we're trying to get before, and this is why I almost laughed. Before, I don't think we had any idea about what we were doing. And in terms of, there was no thought about breath or coordinating the breath or should I inhale, should I exhale. Again, if someone had asked me this 3 years ago, I would have been like, whatever, just keep breathing, don't pass out on me. I would have said something stupid along that line. Whereas instead now we're being very deliberate about, okay, I want a nasal inhale and I want an exhale. I always say people, I use the same analogy over and over again. Blow out like you're blowing out birthday candles at my birthday. You got to blow out 58 candles. So I want you to blow hard and long. And people still don't get it. Even with the amount of time we're spending on this, people still don't get it. They still don't do it. It's still hard for people to conceptualize. But we've moved that into most everything we do. If they're doing quadruped exercise, they're doing it. If they're doing bridging, they're doing it. If they're doing, single leg bridging, cook hip lift, whatever it is, we're trying to get that hard exhale to create the stability that we want. So, and even in some, like just working with some people, depending, 90-90 breathing. I love the sandbag breathing thing with Josh Henkin's Ultimate Sandbags have been a godsend for us in the last year in terms of making all of this stuff flow together. So I always tell people, like leg lowers. We're doing leg lowers. I want you to blow your leg down. And so I think our analogies, and you kind of get into like the Nick Winkelman stuff, our analogies have gotten way better. So if I'm doing leg lowers, I'm telling somebody I want the sandbag just over your forehead so we get a little anterior core activation. And then I want you to think you're going to try to blow your leg to the floor. So that as you're doing that leg lower, you're getting that good, hard, deep abdominal contraction. And hopefully what we can get people to do is eventually have that be very reflexive. Because ultimately that's what you want in terms of, and this is where now we can go back. I can remember the early NASM stuff where the draw-in was really big, and it was sort of like before every exercise started with perform a drawing in maneuver, and then, I mean, that was literally the description of everything that they did, no matter what you were going to do. And it was like that idea, and then in like we talked about, the history of like the McGill thing, brace your abdominals and then. And we've gotten more like, okay, like the RKC idea, like you said, exhale hard while you're doing it. And that's probably going to get you the stability that you need to get.
Absolutely. Coach, I just want to bring up really quick, I mean, it's so Mike Boyle here with you using the sandbag, because Gray Cook and the functional movement systems, they've really been talking about this idea of kind of activating the core through those kind of Gray Cook bands, right? But why do you find that the sandbag is better?
Really simple reason. The sandbag does not need anybody or anything to attach it to. Yeah. That was the thing that grabbed me about the sandbag when they started showing us. And it's so bad because it's Josh, and I can't think of Josh's guy who's in New Hampshire. He did an amazing in-service for us, and I'm really almost embarrassed that I can't give him credit right now in this podcast because his name isn't coming to me. But with the bands, you've got to have something to attach the band to. Either you've got somebody holding it, or they're standing on it, or you're hooking it to a rack or whatever that is. And I found that stuff to be impractical to the point of being not useful. Whereas the sandbags are great because I can schlep the sandbags wherever I want. If I need sandbags in my warm-up area, okay, I'm going to bring my sandbags over to the warm-up area, no problem. Which, if I wanted to warm up and do some sort of core activation stuff with the bands, Cook band, whatever it was, I had to figure out I got to get somebody to stand on the band, so I need a partner, or I need a rack, or I need something to tie them off to. It just was, I think, a simpler, easier logistical thing. And as I said, probably for me, the find of last year was the ultimate sandbag. And this was another thing, and this is why I'm always trying to get everybody to understand. I used to watch Alan Cosgrove with the sandbag stuff and just be like, whatever, you know what I mean? It's like a bag of weights, like, you know, who cares? Like, get a backpack, you know what I mean? Makes no difference. And again, as usual, I was wrong. I didn't sort of do a good job of seeing what should have been right in front of my face. And probably I don't do a good enough job sometimes of listening to my friends, because I should look at that. And that is why the only reason, honest to God, the only reason we did the sandbag in service was because I like Josh and Alan liked the sandbags. And I started saying to myself, why does Alan like this so much? What am I missing? I'm going to let this guy come in and do the in-service. But thinking that, and I told him afterwards, thinking that I'm wasting an hour of my time, wasting an hour of my staff's time, but I'm doing Josh a favor, and I'm checking the box with Alan in terms of I can say to myself, well, okay, I looked at this again. And then coming out of it like, oh my God, what a dumb shit you are. You know, why, you know, but, and then I go back, one of my orthopedic friends talked about surgical procedures one time, and he said, don't be the first guy to do something and don't be the last guy to do something. And I think that from a training standpoint is also pretty good advice. I just ordered, and this has nothing to do with it, but it does have something to do with core. I ordered some steel maces from Perform Better. I said, get me some, I want to play with them. And I don't know if you've seen them. They look like heavy Indian clubs, almost like metal Indian clubs. Yeah. But I've seen people playing with them, and I said, I'm going to get a couple and play with them because I think we can maybe get some anti-rotation core, some unbalanced loading type stuff that might help us. So why not? So I guess my only defense is that I don't stay dumb forever.
There you go. Coach, let's finish up on, you're really maturing. Let's finish up on the programming aspect of this. You did include the 2-day and the 4-day program. And, you know, you don't have a core area, but, you know, the typical, it fits within the Mike Boyle system, roll, stretch, activation. It's really a lot in activation that you kind of include a lot of these breathing ideas. Why don't you do the breathing like first thing, even before rolling? Because I think it would help with the stretches.
Well, I think it would if it was just the breathing, but I think it's more for us trying to get the breathing incorporated into the core exercises and try to get people to understand that relationship of deep abdominal contraction to exhale. So I think it has to be there. But you certainly could. And I think sometimes, and we talked about this, I think in a couple of podcasts ago, sometimes with me, it's just resistance to change, to be perfectly honest, in terms of, I don't like to change too much. And I like to change the things that I really feel like, okay, this is a really good and necessary change. And trust me, it's slow and painful for me. It really is. Even when I think somebody's right and I think I want to change, it's not easy because I do feel like our programming is so good that I don't like to mess with it. So I need to be really, really careful and really convinced, like, hey, this is something that we need to do. Absolutely. Because if you came in and watched, you'd think, you don't do that much breathing. And I'm like, no, we don't. Once we've kind of got somebody to understand it, then it's just more that we're emphasizing it. It becomes a point of emphasis as opposed to an entity unto itself, I guess.
Absolutely. See, and I just said you were maturing. It sounds like you really weren't. But anyway, Coach, I'll let you go on that. And this is the complete core conditioning. We'll have all the links to all this. There's going to be a discount this week, so you might as well jump on this right away. This is, again, what I feel is probably your most important product, most wide range. Anybody can do this, strength coaches, personal trainers, physical therapists. This is a great system, and I think everybody should really, because, like they say, 80% of the people have back pain and 20% are liars. So good stuff on this product.
Well, good. I'm glad you liked it, because I always, as I said, I always get a little bit nervous when I do these, because I feel like, a sports training product is kind of right in my wheelhouse. But when I get into like conditioning or core, but the good thing, as I said, same as with the conditioning, I had to do a lot of work. And again, like the conditioning, there's probably a couple things in this thing that'll come back and bite us somewhere along the way, where someone will say, that's not exactly how it's supposed to be. But I think sometimes I feel like you gotta stick your neck out a little bit and get a little out of your comfort zone. So that's where I am.
All right, yeah, it's a work in progress. So, Coach, thanks for doing this, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right, thanks.